welcome. And just to give a shout out to Circles, remember, I'm aligning with Circles because it aligns with my values and mission. And what is the mission of Circles? It's to address loneliness, the epidemic of loneliness. So it's connecting people with small groups of individuals who share similar life challenges, right? And then we're over 150K people now. So you can see there's on-demand rooms, there's 24/7 small audio rooms. The on-demand is peer-to-peer. You can actually create your own room. I believe that if you, and essentially my messaging for you all is why I'm here. God birthed my ministry out of my misery. So you're going to get to hear a little bit about my story. And for those that are listening to the recording, welcome, whatever time you're listening to it. And then for those that are here, there will be a recording available via Spotify. They'll send out a link for this as well. But I'm here today to talk about the power of storytelling. Right? Let me kick off something. Let me just say this real quick. Did you all know that the average person tells about 6,200 stories in their lifetime? All right. If this is a surprise to you, just heart on the screen, on the screen. So if you thought that we told less stories, I'm here to tell you that we tell an average of 6,200 stories in our lifetime. And keep in mind, I know you know this as well, that stories are a powerful way to connect with others and share your experiences, but they also can help us heal and find meaning in our lives. And that's why we're here. So I want to start with two reflection questions. And if you have a pen and paper wherever you are, if you want to use your cognitive map, go ahead and do it. I want to ask you to just consider this, right? As I'm going to lay out the lay of the land for our conversation today. What is one story you've told multiple times, many times over, right? What's one story you told many times? I'll give you 30 seconds just to think about it. Just think about it. We're not going to share. I just want you to hold it. Put a placeholder there, right? And then the follow-up question I have for you is what is a story that you come back to? What is a story that you come back to? So there's stories that we tell multiple times, and then there's stories that we come back to, right? So give you 30 seconds. I'm not seeing the chat, so I'm going to just pause real quick. Again, for those that are experiencing sometimes some technical difficulties, I'm doing a quick pause just to check in. And let me ask if you're able to unmute Hope. Are you able to see anything in the chat currently? Okay, Nicole says heart. Okay, all right. I don't know if I pop off, if it's gonna let me back in. I might try that, but for the purpose of this time, what I'm going to do, I'm just gonna set the stage for our conversation, and then afterwards we'll have space to discuss, and I'll pop off. And if there's something that I really need to pay attention to because I can't see the chat right now, just go ahead and unmute and let me know. But the question is, and I can't put the question in the chat because it looks like it's not popping up. But reflection question: what is one story that you've told many times, right? And why is it a story that you come back to? So let me actually clarify that. I'm referring to that story, that same story that you told many times. I think I made it seem like there's two different stories. It possibly may be, but typically what I found is a story that we come to many times is also a story that we come back to for a purpose, right? And so this class is specifically, I think I can see the chat. Thank you, God. All right. It might be delayed, but I see it now. Okay, I see. All right. Shout out to Christina, West Virginia, Nicole, Austin, Texas, Rachel, Boston, Christina, again, two Christinas, 86 degrees. Not bad, depending on the field. Hope in the 80s in DMV. I might want to go visit you soon, Christina, 94, Florida. We're in the same place, girl. I'm in Winter Spring, Florida. And you know the field is worse than that because we have this, for those that may not be experiencing, across the nation right now, there's this odd change in the climate right now. And so I'm praying for those that are experiencing loss, and I'm praying for those that are going through difficult times. But just know we see you, I hear you, and yeah, 103 degrees. All right, and let's keep going. Let's keep going real quick. Thank you, because I'm able to see the chat. But essentially, this room is going to explore the power of storytelling. But I'm actually going to talk about one part of the storytelling. It's called the catalyst and debate. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And we're going to discuss also the importance of conflict resolution in our relationships. And I'll do that through the book, Getting to Zero. It's by Jason Gaddis, Getting to Zero. And I'll place it in the chat for you all. In his book, he argues that conflict is essentially the stomping ground for growth and connection, right? It's where we find growth and connection. That's why it's a play on the actual title, Getting to Zero. Not necessarily starting over, but finding common ground, right? So he provides some tools and strategies for resolving conflict in healthy and productive ways. I believe he also has a podcast. It's called the Smart Couple Podcast. I love it. Check it out, actually. And also, I'll share my story. I'll share my story because I want to. I've been giving it as an example of how basically God turned my pain into purpose. So I'll share the catalyst and the debate of my story, and hopefully that's also going to help be the launching pad for you to identify the catalyst in the debate of your story. And remember, my story arc is story of loss and heartbreak. Then it goes into hope and redemption, right? So I hope my story inspires someone today. And also, I hope that you recognize that you're not alone. So let me give the definition of catalyst and debate, and then I'll see more people here. So I might just do a case study real quick to see. Yeah, I'll do a case study and then I'll share my story. How about that? And then we'll reflect together. Okay, so we're talking about the story arc and how to tell your story, not after you get through the pain, but in the midst of pain, not having to relive the pain, but how to find the meaning in the pain, right? So today I'm talking about the catalyst and debate of your story. In every journey from pain to purpose, I didn't say every story, every journey from pain to purpose has a catalyst. It begins with a catalyst, actually. And the catalyst is the event or the experience that sets the journey into motion, right? The catalyst can be anything from like personal tragedy. It can be like a professional setback. Uh, and it can happen to us or we can choose to do it. Let me put that distinction out there too. So it can be life happening to us or it can be the choices you've made. So that's the catalyst, right? So it's the setup. And then there's the debate. And I want to make a distinction because I've heard debate placed in some different ways, but there's two things I want to say. In the way that I'm presenting it, the debate follows the catalyst, right? Because the debate is actually an internal conflict. So what if you notice the catalyst typically is like an external response to external conflict. The debate is the internal conflict. It's where we face that whether you want to give up or not, or if you want to move forward. So I talk about moving forward and not just moving on, right? So that's the internal conflict. And actually that's where the pain, because typically it's pain and it's also difficult in that space, right? Because that's where you're facing yourself. A lot of us, we want the truth, but we don't want to face ourselves, right? And so this is where you start to face yourself a little bit. It's actually the essential part of your journey. It's where you decide what you want your life to be about. That's actually where you start to make that decision, right? So I promise I'll do a case study. You all know I always use Sarah as an example. And so this is before Sarah becomes the great writer, right? Remember, she actually was a lawyer prior. For those that are in some of my other rooms, I do rooms with group dealing with grief, loss, heartbreak, assertive communication, resiliency, gratitude. But Sarah has been the star student, right? And I want to talk about a point where Sarah loses her job, her home, and her husband in a car accident. So this was you had the job loss was actually her choice because she wanted to make a career change, but it was still a loss nevertheless. Okay. I want to make that distinction too. And then, but her husband was actually an unexpected loss, right? And she was devastated. She didn't know what to do to go on. So I hope you all noticing something here. She decided that she wanted to use her story to help others who were going through similar experiences. So she started a blog. This is before she becomes a prolific writer. She started a blog and she wrote about her journey. She also started volunteering at local crisis centers. And I'll take a quick tangent here. As adults, it's very difficult sometimes to find friends that match your faith or your interests. And sometimes what I recommend is actually volunteer because when you volunteer with things that you're passionate about, you don't have to figure out someone that's already interested in the things you're interested in. Let me get back to this. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that because that is something that is happening right now. Adults are losing friends and finding it a hard time to find friends, but they're also at the point where they're experiencing some of the biggest life decisions and most difficult transitions. So I want you all to sometimes consider just volunteering as not just something you're doing for others, but something that actually helps you do for you too. But essentially, her story, Sarah's story, exemplifies what I would say is how we move from pain and we turn that pain into purpose. So here's a question, and I'll see if I can place it in the chat, but I'm not going to bank on that. So, which of the skills did Sarah use, and I'll give you the few skills that I want to call out here. Which of these skills did Sarah use to turn her pain into purpose? And I'll give multiple choice. You know, I'm good for that. And so A, storytelling, B, conflict resolution, C, self-reflection, D, all of the above. And I see Lady Beth here as well. And I see Rachel. No technicalities, ladies. Lori, you got to go with my choices for today so we can keep it moving. All right. So it's A, storytelling, B, conflict resolution, C, self reflection, D, all of the above. D, all of the above. Just place it in the chat for me. So, okay. Awesome. Praise God. I can see the chat. And shout out to Circles, y'all. They are working. Listen, behind and in front of everything you don't see, they are working on these technical glitches. And I'm just grateful for this. And so Beth says, what is AZ? All right, so I see a multitude of people have said the answer. For those that are listening later, we're placing things in the chat. And I want you to know that most of the people placed D in the chat. And the answer is D. Sarah used all of the where I don't remember the options I gave, but she basically used all these to turn it into pain. Yeah, actually, yeah, she used storytelling because she shared her story with others through the blog, but she also used conflict resolution because she was also helping others to help walk through their similar experiences. And it was clear that she used self-reflection because she understood her own experience and then she started to find meaning as a writer and sharing her through the blog. And then she also was volunteering at the local crisis center, right? So Denard, I relate to this story a lot in many ways. Um, One, because I experienced loss and heartbreak, but her heartbreak, I would say, is a completely different heartbreak than mine. But let me share briefly my story, and then we're gonna jump. Okay, I got you, Beth. No, it was I'll share briefly my story. Then I want to actually ask you all some questions. This is where we're gonna reflect together. So here we go. Breathe with me real quick because this is my story, and sometimes the pain of yesterday can feel as vivid as today. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote it is so not just that I don't forget the pain, but I don't forget it to the point, to the degree where someone that else that's going to it, I don't trivialize their pain. Right. So I want you to hear out my story and then I want you to think about your catalyst in your debate. Okay, I'll point out mine. And this is actually at a midpoint, I would say. And for those that don't know, actually in 2008, I had sought to take my life over a failed relationship that I was in for 4.5 years. And it was the one that everyone hoped, it was like the one that everyone banked on succeeding, right? This is that story fairy tale life where it's like the relationship, the love of your life, and you believe that everything is going to work out, right? Well, it didn't. And I can still remember it because it was like yesterday, just like I told you. And after the relationship, I actually lost my apartment, my job, my appetite. I'm pretty sure some other individuals relate to this, especially in the experience of loss. You will at some point in time lose a desire to feed yourself and feed your soul. So I also lost my sense of purpose and even some friends. So I was in a very dark place. You all know what I just said in 2008, but here's the problem. I didn't know how I was going to get out. But then something happened, you all. Jay, she found me again, right? And so I need y'all to catch this. This is like when we leave, I talk about this a lot. We leave the doggy door open, right? You thought you closed the door, you thought you closed the window, you locked it, you checked it twice. She texted me out the blue, Beth, and she wanted to meet up again, basically. Even though she was in a new relationship, Ali, even though she was in a new relationship, she told me she was still thinking about me. Ding, 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 ding. Christina, this is when I was so conflicted because I didn't want her to hurt her new boyfriend, but I couldn't deny my feelings. I'm just being completely transparent with you all. And lady, this is what happens actually. We met at my house late one night, right? And to no avail, all the efforts I did, God was telling me to meet on a neutral ground. She found the most uncanny way to actually wait until last minute, tell me basically change of events, and she shows up at my front door, right? And I remember this like it was yesterday because the air was thick with tension. I could smell, and I have a horrible sense of smell, but I can smell two things, and they all collided that day. I could smell her perfume, and I could smell the burnt food I cooked that day, and no one laughed at me, okay? Because she was the cook, and I was trying to learn how to, regain my appetite and everything. Um, and that day we talked for hours on end. She told me about her new relationship. And I told her about my struggles. We laughed, we cried together, and by the end of the night, I knew I still loved her, but I also knew I couldn't be with her. She was in a new relationship, and I didn't want to be that other man, right? And I need you all to catch this. Hope. God literally told me in the midst, and we never opened the Bible together. So, for those that don't know, my worldview is as a Christian, I'm a pastor, but most importantly, I'm a friend of God. That's how He calls me. And I'm also His child. And so, this was the moment where, although we were in the church, we never actually spent time in the Bible together. So, God tells me to go to the very beginning, open up the book of Genesis, and that was the first and the last time. That was the first and the last time. And I remember God distinctly telling me to tell her that maybe, and I want to put another caveat of betrayal in this. She was in a new relationship with someone that was in a singing group at the church that I created, a praise team, if that's a better terminology. And so, like when you talk about betrayal, these are individuals I invited into my home. We're doing practices, all these things. And but God told me distinctly to tell her that maybe He's giving us a second chance at each other by her staying in her relationship. Right. And I could hear nothing but silence. And it felt like an eternity. But the next day, I woke up feeling more hopeful than I had in a long time. I realized despite losing so much, I still had something to offer the world. So I shared my story and I knew it was going to help others. I started to write about my journey, Jay, and I shared it on Facebook. I'm a Facebook group. That's at my age group. So I'm 37 years of age now. And I shared it with the world. By sharing my story, I actually helped someone in the Philippines that was in the midst of looking at my story. She says that she was contemplating suicide, right? So I realized I was actually helping others. So my story is one of pain and loss, but it's also one of hope and redemption, as I told you. And it's one that I feel like when I think about my story, I feel like there's always light, even in the darkest times. Let me put it that way. And so for me, my catalyst, and I want you all to think about this. My catalyst for my story was the moment when she found me again. Okay. So remember what I gave you as the definition of catalyst. That's the point where you can actually your journey starts there. Let me put it that way. It goes in motion, and it's either something that happens to us or it's something you choose. It could be a personal tragedy. It can be a professional setback. It can be the moment where love loss is regained. But then this is where you need to catch my internal conflict, which is the debate that happens, right? And remember, your catalyst is the beginning of your journey from pain into purpose. So the debate in my story is that internal conflict, whether I should actually meet with her or not. but I knew it was wrong, Hope. I knew it was wrong, and I couldn't deny my feelings for her. So now you hear my story. We're family here. I have two Hopes here. I have Lori. I have Allie. I have Alexander. I have Charm, Beth, Lady, and I think this is Michelle. Let me see. Yeah, Michelle, Jay, and Rachel. So I want you to just for a moment, because we're going to share a little bit of what was the catalyst for your journey from pain into purpose. Remember, as I'm defining catalyst, I just want you to think about it because I also want you to write it down. Right? It can be anything, anything. It can, but it's essentially where your journey starts, right? And it's where you choose or something happens to you. So you can share it in the chat if you like, but I want to give you 30 seconds. Actually, we won't take that long. Actually, I want to take just 10 to 15 seconds. Think about what was the catalyst for your journey from pain to purpose. What set you on that trajectory? What was that pain or loss that you experienced that set you on that trajectory? So take 20 seconds, starting now, 20 seconds, think about it. And I see one hand actually. So I'll give 10 seconds and then I'll go to Charm to share. So I got 10, 9, 8, and I'll stop counting so I don't disturb your mindset. Hope you found it. Hope you found it. All right. And so I have two hands, Charm, and I see Ali, and then I'll go to the chat afterwards. Go ahead, Charm. Feel free to share. What was the catalyst of your journey from pain into purpose? Uh-oh. Charm, are you able to unmute?
Yes,
There
I'm
you go.
here. Um, well, I'm not sure if I'm in my purpose yet, but I do have a testimony, and my testimony is just breaking free from abuse. Um, I was scapegoated in my family, and I left, just completely packed my things, and I left, and I became homeless. So I know that this is not. I'm still in the storm. However, I know that this has a purpose for me, um, but I'm still trying to figure that out, which is why I'm here. That's all.
Charm, you are already someone that has my heart. Um, I resonate deeply with what you shared, and I want to thank you for sharing. And especially because of what you shared, I want to, if I may, I want to share how what you shared also already set us up for your what I call the catalyst, or what is called the catalyst in storytelling, because your catalyst could have been a couple of things. It could have been the abuse that you experienced, right? But even the testimony where you realized that you couldn't live in that situation where you was being abused and you felt like you needed to leave in order to protect yourself. That's part of that catalyst too. And then we're going to talk about where the debate happened there. So I do want you, if you haven't written that down yet, I do want you to write it down. And what I'm going to encourage, not yet, don't use sensory perceptions yet. Okay. Because if we use all the sensory perceptions in the moment of the pain, it can reactivate us. Right. We're just writing it down so that we can take note of it. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay, okay, and you're right. We may not be at that point of, and I'll share this just briefly because I have a huge pocket in my heart for the vulnerable population of those that may be homeless through involuntary actions of others or their own choices. And because I was homeless at one point in time myself, but I also worked because of that, my lived experience. I worked as a homeless case manager, and so one thing I will say to you as well, another part of your catalyst could have been the support of others, right? In your testimony, it could have been like family or friends that encourage you to leave, right? And tell you, but like for me, I heard language of like you deserve better, right? You can make a new life for yourself. But what I want to tell you too is, and I'm using this language because this is important as when you talk about testimony, that when you okay?
I'm not sure. That's not me.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry. I couldn't see who was actually sharing. Um, but I just want to take a moment to make sure that whoever it is, if you are right, just let me know. Just hard on the screen, and I'll make sure that we come to you shortly. Just want to make sure that you know I see you. Okay. Um, and as one thing I do want to tell you, Charm, is what I learned is that, especially in your testimony, you reached a breaking point. But one thing I learned is, and it seems like your worldview, because you use the word testimony, I'm making a huge assumption here. What I found is that when you put parallel and it's perpendicular, when you reach your breaking point, I want you also to notice and look for your breakthrough, because typically that's where we find our faith being activated, being challenged, being stretched, right? Because you may have felt like you could not take abuse anymore, right? And that's exactly why you decided to leave. So that's the breaking point. But I also want you to take note of the the breakthrough, like the aspects of what did you overcome to have to these challenges, and then also identify like for me, my worldview is I believe God helped me to overcome heartbreak, right? So how did God show up, right? And for me, it was his voice. It was through my aunt who left Haiti, who never came to America to actually come and be a comfort for me, right? With my parents. So I want you to take note of those things because it's easy to forget and it's easy to feel alone. And I believe sometimes that's the biggest lie of the enemy, that we're alone and that no one understands and no one cares, right? So I want you to take note of those, write that down, and we're going to continue with this because I want you to also at the end reflect on something else, if you don't mind, because you're right. We may not be at our purpose, but at least we're not where we started, not where we started. And we're going to continue on that journey together. Thank you for sharing, Charles. I next up see um, it's Ali. I'm sorry, I keep saying Ali. Ali, do you mind sharing your thoughts?
Sure, I just resonated a lot with charm, but my situation is my son. My son is not okay. He is mildly on the autism spectrum, wasn't diagnosed until 11. And I really don't know that it's fair to call him abusive to me. I would never tolerate this behavior from anybody else. But I have also removed myself from the home. I'm staying in the same apartment complex and just kind of couch floating and feeling really low. So I'm definitely really still in the pain. And my purpose is to glorify God, not only in my own life, but I'm hoping that my son's life will glorify him as well. So I don't know if that's makes sense in what you're asking, but that's what I that's what I have to say. Thanks, Denard, for having this, and I'm sorry because I haven't been here in every one.
Oh no, Ali, you listen, I'm gonna say this to you because you know you have my heart as well. And I know this is recorded, but I don't care. At this point in time, I just want to say this to you. But that's very difficult. I don't know if you all have like looked at my resume, like you all are your life experience is also why I chose the avenues in my professions. I actually had a chance to help a mother start a organization based on what you're saying is your experience. That's difficult. The challenges of raising a child with that's differently abled with autism is, and also, yes, I think you can say that. You can say that you're not saying your son is abusive, right? And I remember. Because I had to document these things too, right? I remember, so she was married to a lawyer, and they had to she had to tend to him full time. And the short version is they could never buy a nice house, right? Because he would just they had to find like literally houses that like were run down, dilapidated, and she felt overwhelmed and low. Like she never wanted to come home. Her only time of reprieve, Ali, was when I came and I would create, um, outdoor activities for him, and we would go cycling and things of that nature. But I just want you to. What I'm trying to say is, essentially just remember that you're not alone because it feels that way in these situations. And that's the same that I resonate deeply with what you're saying with charm, because what I would say to you also, and I don't know this to be true because we haven't talked about this, but one thing his mom was doing that was abusive to herself, she stopped taking care of herself, right? Like she wouldn't do any activities like even when I took him out, like that was her only time of reprieve. She just sat there ruminating over like what can she do to help him, right? And she never found ways to relax or de-stress. And Ali, you're right. I believe you are glorifying God's purpose in your life and through your son. And I think that's a noble goal, right? But it's also a difficult one. Like I literally preached this Saturday at a church, and while I'm preaching, this mother is having her child. He's crying, and again, I can tell. I've been through these things, and she already feels this social shame. And I'm Caribbean. I'm of Haitian descent, and so in the Caribbean church, it's almost like looked down upon for your kids to run or even talk like during a prayer. Like they have to be adults, basically. Let me put it out that way. And so afterwards, I stopped her and I talked to her, and I kid you not, Ali, she started crying because out of her experience, my purpose is to create a worship center because I believe we were created to move. Kids learn best when they move. And any church I've been in, if kids are differently abled because of my training, I create a space for that. I don't care about the sermon for the adults, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that I believe God is sending people that understands your expectations and understands your need in spaces where even with what your catalyst that you talked about is the decision to remove yourself from that home, and you're experiencing into to help your son experience something, because you couldn't live in that situation, because you also need to protect yourself. But I just want you to know that this is a complex one. There's no easy answer. There's really no easy answer. But I really want you to be able to write that down and also know that even if you succumb to amnesia, know that God is sending a complete stranger your way to tell you. Denard did not know you before this, right? To tell you that he's actually raising up people with literally cultural sensitivity and social work competency to inform their theology, to say that the spaces that these churches are in are not conducive to the kids nor the caregivers. Right. And so I don't know how that lands with you. I just want you to know that you continue to glorify God in your life and in your son's life, because I believe that's a noble goal. And I believe that's what's going to continue to give you strength and hope in the midst of the pain. But as we're talking about that catalyst, you're right. That catalyst that you're talking about is the aspect of removing yourself from that place of abuse and trying to make sure you create an experience for your son where he can glorify God. So thank you, Ali, for sharing that. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I hope that was helpful for you. Oh, Charm, I'm looking in the chat. I see. Welcome, my sister. Toujours content pour moi, mon moyo. So, and Creole is my native tongue. So just know I am always happy to see my people. And let me turn to the chat real quick, you all, as we continue this conversation, just to make sure I did not miss anyone. Okay, Rachel, my sister. My purpose is embodied, the following quote. And you all always make sure you screenshot her quotes. I've been actually doing that myself. Hopefully that's okay, Rachel. I never asked you that, but I always try to do that. Scream so that one day, 100 years from now, another sister will not have to dry her tears, wondering where in history she lost her voice. My goodness. My goodness. Every time you write that, it changes everything for me. My why, and that's by Jasmine Carr. My why is also to help others find their why. My why, my purpose is not finite nor fixed. I'm always growing. Oh, you already okay. The who has a why to live. He who has a why to live can bear almost anything. Listen, one of the greatest philosophers of anytime, anytime. And so please screenshot that if you did not get a chance. If you're listening at a later time, I just want you to hear these quotes again. Scream so that one day, 100 years from now, Another sister will not have to dry her tears wondering where in history she lost her voice. And in regards to Rachel's why, she said that her why is not finite nor fixed. So essentially, her why is a legacy, right? Creating a legacy. And the quote is, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And I'm going to read Hope. Um, Okay, perfect. Thank you, Rachel, for giving permission. And then Hope shares, I came to the realization that my why was not God's way. I let other people define me. I'm going to let that sit real quick before I continue reading. I literally just posted something on this. Hope, I'm actually going to read it for you all because I had a individual, one of my colleagues, she does a podcast called Please Do Tell, and I will be inviting her here. She's an archivist and she does help tell stories, but mostly through grief, especially within the BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color. And in her storytelling right now, she's talking about women, strong women that people are characterizing as strong women. And I'm trying to find this real quick. Just give me 1 second before I forget this. And something that was shared, and it reminds me of what you just said here, Hope, in regards to not letting other people define. Okay, yeah, here we go. The young lady basically said that she is finding a way to take her own journey because a lot of people see her as a strong friend. And so they want her to show up for them. And they got mad at her for not sharing her pain points and the journeys that she's going through. Now, there's a balanced conversation that needs to be had here. But I love what she said. Essentially, I felt her aspect that sometimes I wrote that we do need. She said she felt called to follow her own path and make her own choices. And I think that can be a difficult situation, but I think it's also the one that best leads us to some level of fulfillment and happiness. But it's also important to remember that we all have different journeys, right? So while we're talking about journey from pain to purpose, and what worked for one person may not work for another person. So it's essential to listen to our hearts and our intuition and follow God's path for us, right? God's path, His will, right? And even if it's different from what others say, and even your own expectations. Let me continue reading. Um, Growing up in a narcissistic family system, I was given the scapegoat role. My husband abused me and picked at all my traumas to control me. Even in the pain, I praised God and He got me out of there. Now I'm letting God rebuild my identity that was attacked and stolen by the enemy. Thank you for sharing that. And I see Christina says, for me, it's not wanting my children to go through what I went through. My purpose is to help others and let them know that they aren't alone. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing, everyone. And as we continue, I do want to ask you now, just briefly, we're going to do this. Just think about what was the debate that you faced, right? If we go back to, if Ali, if I can use your example, and because it's the one that's actually most recent in my mind, for me, the debate that you had was whether or not you should experience the abuse, right? And as I said earlier, that is a complex one, but it's an internal debate, right? It's one, where do I stay? Do I stay? Should I go? Should I leave? And even I would even consider the other aspect of it, is this even abuse? Right? That's the debate. It's an internal conflict, right? So I want you to think about what was the debate you faced, right? Again, I said the debate is the internal conflict. Um, for me, and my story was whether I meet up with the young lady or not. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't deny the way I felt about her, right? So think about what your debate is. And again, the debate follows the catalyst, right? So if you remember Ali's, I think I said her decision to remove herself from it, from that space. But then she has this internal debate whether or not it's actually she's experiencing abuse, right? That could actually happen before and after, right? So I want you to think about what your debate is. Just give 20 more seconds to that and just write it down. Just write it down. And I'm going to read a couple of things as you all are writing, and then we're going to move on because I did promise I was going to talk about Jason's book. and how it relates to our conversation. Then we'll wrap up with some reflection. And I'll say, if it's okay with you, I do want to save at least 5 to 7 minutes for you all if you have any pressing questions that you want to ask, so we can ask on the spot, because I want to make sure that you leave here with some questions answered as well. Okay, so what we see in the chat for those that are listening, Beth says, divorce and finding my why. I am here for me and others, knowing I add value. So this is in response to the previous question. I'm sorry for, I just dropped something in my house. But she says, knowing I add value to life, I matter, and what I do today or don't do will be a reflection of my tomorrows going forward. The past is only good for knowing what I don't want and what I do as a reference point, not as a label or judgment. My motto, I love it. And the one I taught my daughter is to take the best and leave the rest. Everywhere I go and through every situation I choose to grow through. So you all put this down, because these are positive affirmations as well that you can use to remind yourself as you are experiencing those difficulties, those pain points. We'll talk about that too, because that's something Jason talks about in his book. You have to identify your pain points. Um, Lisa says, I'm going through divorce and court tomorrow from a narcissist, and I have so much anxiety. We see you, Lisa. And Lisa, what I do want you also to do is also, because for you, I would also say in that experience, what you're talking about, and if that's your setback, that's your personal tragedy, right? That catalyst, right? And your internal debate could be just like I had for an individual I was counseling, like, and just going to court gives her anxiety, right? So she was debating on, should I just let him have everything or not? Like, she didn't feel the need to fight. So that was the internal conflict. Right? And it was very painful because in her mind, she felt like she was giving up on the kids. Right? So I want you to write those down. And yeah, that's exactly what she said, Lisa. That's exactly what she said. And what I'm also wanting you to do is, and that's why I said don't use the sensory perceptions, and I don't want to trivialize it, but I also want you to be able to write it down, because I want you to be able to come back to this, and so that we can actually learn, kind of like what Ashley is saying, learn how to move forward and not just move on. Right. And we do also have some other rooms, and we also have some video groups where we do talk about navigating separation or divorce, especially with kids or without kids as well, or coping with heartbreak and healing from it. I do that on Thursdays at 8:15, but it's a faith-based room. So as we continue to move on, um, and I want to read lastly, Charm, right? I pray God cleanses me from the spirit of rejection, shame, and guilt that wasn't mine to carry. I need healing from abuse. And I think I skipped something else. Forgiveness helps you mentally and physically. And Hope says, I refuse to idolize and worship my husband because the narcissist will punish you if you don't do what they want. You're right, ladies. You're right. You're right. And I'll pause, and I see Rachel, your hand. I'm sorry, I just noticed it. Do you mind sharing now, Rachel, your thoughts?
No, not at all. Sorry, I just have a quick question. It was shift change for a quick second, so I'm not sure about the question you're currently asking and what the responses are to it
Yeah.
in the chat.
Yeah, I think people are sharing their current challenges. I would say it that way, and I think there's room for that too. But the question as it pertains to the conversation is to identify what's your debate, right? What's the internal conflict that you're experiencing with your current catalyst or the catalyst that you're experiencing in your story. And so if I were to look at these stories that's in, and I'm just going to use one of the things that I shared previously, Rachel, is like theming, right? Here is a theme of the aspect of high conflict relationships. And we're going to talk about that because that's a theme in the book of Jason's book. It's actually high conflict relationships and high stake relationships is actually the point of the book. But he actually talks about identifying pain points and then also talking about that, how to resolve those conflicts. And in order to do that, we also have to identify the internal conflict before we try to exert energy, time, and effort on the external conflicts. So these would be external conflicts that also exacerbate the internal conflict, the debate that we're talking about. Does that help? Oh, did I lose Rachel? Well, she might not be able. She's in a shift change. She did say. Beth, go ahead, and then we'll actually share the book, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead, Beth.
Okay, so for me is overcoming the challenges of where I'm at in life now after going through an extremely traumatic divorce.
Mm,
For most of my life, I was with that person, and overcoming the challenges and the blocks and barriers that I tell myself with the stories that were told to me, the stories of not being good enough, or the
mm,
ones you hear, the chatter that you hear that you're too old, you're too this, you're too that.
mm,
There's not much time left. Even though I know that I do believe that I want to take my pain and turn it into purpose as I have been. I am struggling with the stories that were told to me from someone whom I trusted. And I trusted in a sense of having a marriage that I thought was from God. That at
mm,
least on my part, as far as looking at the man, and loving him as unto the Lord, and being unequally yoked, sent me down you know, a whirl of his self-destruction, and then, what he reaped, what he sowed in my life, now I'm reaping. And the one story that he always told, that he's still telling himself, that I'm really that I have to, I get to, I'm blessed to, and now God's saying it's time to, I'm at a turning point, and I have to stop telling that same story of just not being enough and never being able to reach my goals, and knowing that there's not, you know, I'm later in my life where I should be looking more towards retirement. And the biggest thing was the poverty story, was the
mm,
one that he told to himself. And he had one of the most amazing businesses that I was part of, that I helped launch and build in a very hard economy at the time, and the town we were in, and the mindsets was very country, very set back in their ways. And I was able to sell it with faith, on a shoestring budget, and
mm.
just because I believed in it, because I knew that it would sell itself. So, but anyway, so just shaking all that, those different mindsets where I actually do have a voice, and I get to think for myself, and trying to navigate my life, and staying connected with my purpose and my why is really what, even my grandchildren, and wanting to be part of their lives, and moving out of Arizona so I could be, even though I know God sent me here, I have a daughter. I have to wait for 4 years to finish high school, granddaughter that I adopted. And so, you know what I mean? Just wanting to move forward, and also in my purpose, knowing that, now is the time. You know, I'm getting tired. I'm tired of running around. I'm tired of driving so much. I love my job. I feel very nurtured by being a humanitarian and a caregiver, and the people I take care of, I love it. And I try to do my best to reflect Christ, and bring the Lord there. So that's about it.
No, that's thank you for sharing. And I love the what I'm seeing in the chat as well. And you all have to keep it up. I love the support. And I would, if I can just distill something in what you shared, because it's understandable. You're going through extremely traumatic challenge. Like and what you identified is the struggle between self-doubt and negative thoughts, right? Um, and it's important to remember that these thoughts are not always true, and I would say they're not true, actually. you are good enough because I've heard you talk, and there is time for you to heal and rebuild your life. And one of the things we do need to do is challenge those negative thoughts, because I've always said you can get a truth out of a lie, but you can't get a lie out of a truth, right? And essentially, what I just did was reframe those the narratives that people said, that you said, people said, and even the ones that we said to ourselves. And that's the debate. That debate is whether or not you're good enough, and it's a complex one. And again, just like I told Ali, there's no easy answer to that, but it's important to write it down, because essentially where we get to the message, and you'll see this, we'll recognize that once we recognize our worth, we recognize that everyone else has value and worth, right? Everyone has unique individual strengths and weaknesses. But whatever, and you said I matter, right? What matters is that we are willing to work on ourselves and improve ourselves, right? And so that's the challenging the negative thoughts, but also being kind to yourself. And that's how we start to overcome those challenges. But we have to write down that debate. Whether I'm good enough is the debate, right? Whether or not I'm good enough is the debate, I would say. And next up, we'll take Rachel, and then I'll just do for a minute, sharing the aspect of what we have from the book, and then we'll recap as well. And Lisa, I do see your thoughts. What I would say is, in regards to what you're dealing with, I can't speak directly to it in this space because we also have spaces curated for it. But if you're on the app, what I would say, afterwards, on the app, there's also spaces on the app for audio rooms, specifically for dealing with either grief, loss, separation, or divorce. And I would encourage you to check out those rooms, because there is space for you to heal on your journey as well. And as I said on Thursday, I will be talking about this midpoint that you're talking about as well. So my prayers are with you, but I also encourage you to continue to check out other places on the chat on the app as well. Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you. So in response to the debate, I definitely think I need more work refining what it means to be able to answer, perhaps in a more apropos fashion. But I think what comes up for me is something that feels relatively general, and like a debate or a conflict that sort of courses through the heart of, I guess, every catalyst or situation that I am in, turning that pain into purpose. So one comes up is loyalty. And I put that in heavy quotes because there's like this idea for me of, I know that I'm never not going to feel guilty, because if I'm loyal to myself, I'm not going to be loyal to someone else. And if I'm not loyal to someone, or if I'm loyal to someone else, then I'm not going to be loyal to myself. So that's one debate. Where does my loyalty go? And I also recognize it's not so black and white, but just for time purposes, that's one. And the other is what's most important to me. Is it the relationship that I'm in? Is it the objective, or is it standing in my own integrity and aligned with my values? And one of the biggest ones for me is between what I know and what I feel, and how I get that dime to drop from my head into my heart, I think. So those are the biggest, I guess, debates or challenges that like course through all of the pain that helps me, or that propels me to find purpose. But again, I know that there's not like a right or wrong answer, but I think I'm still a little confused on what the question is, and perhaps like what a catalyst looks like, or rather what a debate looks like.
Oh, actually, I think you gave us a great example as we wrap up here. Let me use what you shared. So your debate is you're struggling with the debate of like, and I'm just giving, it's a common debate, honestly. And it's one that's, I think, is probably the most difficult to resolve. It's the debate between being loyal to others versus loyal to self, right? It can show up in different ways. Like, for example, for me, in my culture, I'm taught to be loyal to family, friends, and loved ones, despite how they treat us, right? Respect the elders. And it's important to keep the promises and stand by it, especially those that cared for you. On the other hand, we're also taught to be true to yourself. Don't let anybody do, and Charm knows this. Don't let, like my mom would tell me, don't let anybody slap you, right? But she was always there slapping me up to the age of 16, right? So we're taught that we should follow our own hearts. And then we're also, we should not let others dictate our choices, right? So there's a debate that, and it's a complex one, right? How do I honor my parents, but also honor my sense of self-worth? Right? And for you, the debate would be loyalty to others and loyal to oneself. And even what you, I think the other one is also one that I would call out real quick before we wrap up. Let me see how I would say it. Okay, so you said it perfectly, like the head and heart, right? I think that's also a common debate, right? Especially in relationships. But on one hand, our head tells us based on logic and reason, right? It tells us what is the right thing to do, even if it's not easy, right? On the other hand, and you all heard that in my story, that was my debate actually, Rachel. My debate was, I know it's not right, but I love her, right? And so our heart tells us what to feel, and they tell us what we want. So remember, she told me what I wanted, like essentially that we can still be together, and that possibly we should try it again, right? Even if it's not what we should do. That's the debate, right? And again, when you see the debate, you see that it's not an easy one, and it's a complex one as well, right? But there's dignity and simplicity. So that's why we're starting by writing it down and identifying the conflict, right? And then you said something that I think is key too. You got to consider your values. Like, what are my values? What is important to me? And once you know your values, then you can start weighing out the pros and cons. We weigh out the pros and cons after the promise was broken, right? On each side of the debate, to be honest. So what we're doing right now is identify what actually set things in motion, which is that catalyst to start journeying from that pain into purpose. Mine was the aspect of her contacting me once I was finding myself again, right? I was finding myself again without her, but then she finds me again. The debate was, okay, should I meet with her or not? That was my internal conflict. Right. So the debate in these situations can look more practical. It can look like a simple thing where, okay, there's a friend that you've been there for all this time, but they're starting to tell you in a moment where you're holding them accountable, Rachel, they can say you should listen more. Right. And now you're realizing that this friend actually has more things, too much that you can handle. Right. And they're burdening you at this point in time. So your internal debate is, should I let them know that we're going to part ways, or should I stay? Should they're hoping things are going to change? And typically, we're loyal to the wrong people for the right reasons. So both debates can actually happen, and they can coincide each other. But what we're trying to do is distill them to say the catalyst actually it follows the catalyst. So whatever your catalyst is, you identify what your debate was in that moment. Now, real quickly, I know we're at time. Rachel, I hope that helped. Um, and I know we're at time, but I do want to say this from the book because I did promise this. I'll just do a real quick recap for the book. The book that I was referring to, it's I'm forgetting the title right now, actually. Lord help me slow down in my mind. Jason talks about this aspect of high stake conflicts. And let me see if I can remember the title of the book. I'm so sorry. My mind is running everywhere right now as we're about to wrap up. And I'll try to get the name of the book. I forgot the name of the book now. But essentially the reason why I think this relates to it, yes, getting to zero. Getting to zero. Yes, getting to zero. That's the name of the book. And it's Jayson, then Gaddis is the name of the author. And I believe this is important when we talk about catalysts and debates, and we're going to wrap up in 2 minutes here, because it can help us go from that pain to purpose. And there's three things he talks about in the book. He basically says people need to understand the root causes of the conflict in their relationships. So you got to identify the pain points. We like to move on and not move forward. So he said, identify the pain points in order to move forward. Secondly, He talks about some tools and strategies in resolving high conflict relationship more productively, right? So in this is where we start to find our purpose, right? In relationships, we can build stronger, more fulfilling connections. And so that's why sometimes when you don't feel connected to that person in that relationship, it's because that you actually haven't connected to them in the sense of purpose. Like when I talk to people about my wife, she's my purpose mate. We're aligned in purpose, right? And we fulfill it together. But in conflict, we have to learn how to resolve it in a healthier, more productive way. Otherwise, we're actually draining our joy, which then diminish our ability to walk out our purpose in our relationship, right? And then the third thing he talks about is emphasizing the importance of storytelling and conflicts resolution. So this is the way we can actually help others and connect to others on a deeper level to understand each other. So I tell people all the time, one of the things that the myth I bought into is the cheap cliche or the mindset that you know the person that's for you is if they can actually finish your speech, right? And they know what you want without you telling them. And I learned that in storytelling after me and my wife hit I want to say a huge bump in our road, right? I started to recognize that I never gave her place for her own voice, right? And then she assumed that I was supposed to know what she said, but that's actually a red flag. And so in this book, the reason I'm saying getting to zero, and that I would share one more thing. There's a quote that he says. He says, conflict is usually the result of too much closeness or too much distance. And that resonates with me because I experienced both on in the experience with my wife. We were getting close, but we were not communicating. And then we were getting distant. We were trying to over communicate instead of dealing with the root cause of the problem, right? And how does this help us heal? How does this help us find hope? How does this help us understand what we need to heal from our stories and find meaning and connect to others? Is what I want to say is that we cannot continue to avoid conflict, and that's where the catalyst takes place, right? And in order to get to that debate, we need to actually understand what the conflict is, what the roots are, and then we can start to kind of peel back the layers of our situations, right? We're trying to resolve the problem, but we can't identify the problem. We're trying to figure out how to deal with things in a healthier way, but we haven't identified our tools. So that's why Denard is slowing things down today, is to say, let's write down what the catalyst is. That's why I did the first three sessions of saying, okay, let's find out your backstory. Let's find out what's the opening image. So what's your upbringing? What's your childhood like? And then bring you to the place of where we're at now, right? What's the current challenge you're experiencing? All right. What is the debate that's in your mind? Right. And then next, what we're going to talk about is actually we're going to move past that and move forward and actually start to identify some tools. So today, what I'm asking you to do is just start to write so that if you succumb to amnesia, instead of trying to make a good decision, you can make the right decision. Right. And instead of trying to be loyal to someone else, you can be loyal to yourself. Right. And so, and even if, like I was telling Hope, if you succumb to some amnesia, you can be reminded that someone sent a perfect stranger on my path today to tell me something simple. And you heard it from Beth. I matter. My story matters. But what matters most today is that I begin to write it down. And to write it down in a way that not just makes sense, but gives meaning. And that's what I'm hoping you all will receive today as we wrap up. I know that we didn't get a chance to delve into the book, but just know that you can actually use this book to deal with high conflict, high stressful relationships, high stake relationships. But in essence, you're actually using it to deal with more of an understanding of yourself, how to move from that pain into purpose. And first, you need to identify the catalyst, and then I want you to identify that debate, right? And then next time, we're going to give more information, and I hope that you all can come because next week we're going to start to share more in the beginning of the session, and we're going to talk through your story. We're going to talk through your story. Don't be scared. I'll make sure that the prompts are gentle and they're going to be invitational. So it's actually based on what you share. We're going to see where God is taking us next and where you want to go next, right? So I thank you all for being here. But remember, ultimately, as you journey from pain into purpose, You cannot get to where you want to get through without being you. Okay. As you journey from pain into purpose, you cannot get to where you want to or through without being you. So I love you all. Godspeed. God bless. Thank you, Circles, again, for allowing us this space. And I will see you all here next Sunday as we continue our journey together.
I
Bye,
love you.
everyone.
I love you
Thank
too,
you.
Denard. Thank you. Love you guys.
Take care, y'all.
Bye.
Bye bye for now.
Bye.
Oh, Hope, the name, I hope I gave the name of the book. I do apologize. I didn't even look into the chat.
My memory
Okay.
sucks. I
Yeah, no,
have
no, you're
to
good. You're good. You're good. I was struggling to remember it at the time. I didn't even realize the time. But it's getting to zero. Getting to
Thank you.
zero.
Okay, thank you.
Getting to zero. You're welcome. Bye,
I didn't
everyone.
know this was the whole thing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt or anything.
No, hey, this is your space. This is your space. No interruption.
I didn't know.
Next time, what I will do, I would just go ahead and copy the text of those things and the resources. I'll just write that in the chat for you also. That way it can be there, and I'll pin it in the very beginning, and then I'll pin it in the end. That way you all will have it. So I'll do that next time. That's actually great feedback.
Thank you for your help.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Bless.
Bye, Lori. Bye, Allie. Allie, I see you. My heart goes out to you, my sister. Bye, Hope. Both Hopes. Bye, Alexander. Bye, Michelle. Bye, Christina. Bye, Jay. Thank you all for being here, and I hope to see you here next Sunday. Bye bye.